Hello, everybody. My name is William Parhamus, and today I'm joined by Paul Johansson, my friend, and Vince George. Vince is a candidate running to represent West Virginia's first congressional district in the U.S. House of Representatives. We will be asking him a series of important questions about his campaign and his plans for addressing issues West Virginians face. This interview is not an advertisement or an endorsement. It's simply an opportunity for voters to hear directly from the candidate. So we'll start with an introduction. Paul,
Hello, my name is Paul Johansson. Will and I have met in the Morgan County area, and Will came up with the idea of interviewing candidates so people could get a very personal experience of them outside of the usual media filter of journalists. And since we're not journalists, uh, we wanted to just present a place where a candidate could speak in depth and at length on particular questions that might be of interest to people. Glad to be here and glad that Will has run with this as far as he has, and hope we keep going.
awesome. And Vince, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and share your core policies and goals?
Sure. My name is Vince George, and like you say, I'm running for the first district, the U.S. House. The incumbent right now is Carol Miller, who is a Republican from Huntington. It's the district is 28 counties. That basically, if you go up to Jackson County on the Ohio River, then go due east over to Pendleton on the Virginia border, uh, it's and then it's everything south and west over to Kentucky and Virginia. Um, and I grew up in South Charleston in Kanawha County, and that's where I'm running out of, where I live in South Charleston. And my parents were both born and raised in Huntington, and I've got cousins in Raleigh County too, in Beckley. And those are three, as you know, three big for West Virginia anyway, three big urban areas with Beckley, Charleston, and Huntington. They're included in those three counties: Cabell, Kanawha, and Raleigh. And then also, my dad's got some history from having gone to Greenbrier Military School in Greenbrier County in Lewisburg, which is now about 50 years, a little over 50 years ago, was changed to the osteopathic school. And one of my nieces actually graduated from there. She's a DO that just got married and went to the O school in Lewisburg. So that was kind of cool for her to go where her granddad went. But and it's because the same buildings, they just converted the buildings. But anyway, so I grew up here and I worked. I went to school in Morgantown. Worked in various government jobs. I'd always been interested in politics and worked in different campaigns, federal, state, county, city campaigns, and I had been a candidate several times too. And um, and so I went to Morgantown, went to college in Morgantown, and at WVU graduated there, and actually got a graduate degree there later in public policy analysis, and so I was really lucky to be able to have a career in government because a lot of people take a degree, but then they don't necessarily get to work in what they studied or what they like to do. And so I was lucky in that regard. I got to work in state government in not only in West Virginia with the Department of Health and Human Resources, but also with I was in Florida for some years too, and retired there from the Florida DEP, Department of Environmental Protection in Florida, and was a and retired from AFSCME there as a union member, American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. And and then I'd also, with DHHR, I'd also been a member of NASW, National Association of Social Workers. And then in between those two times in state government, I actually worked as a school teacher in Berkeley County, right in between you guys. Well, no, Inwood's in Berkeley, isn't it? Yeah. So anyway, yeah, but in Martinsburg, I taught at Martinsburg High School in I guess it was oh 03, oh 04, I think. Anyway, early 2000s, and then I taught at Shepherd uh, for a year, and also taught a class at Fairmont State as well. And I got a master's degree, like I say, in public policy analysis from WVU as well. Um, and so and then another time, actually, I thought at one point I wanted to be an attorney, and I actually went to law school for a year at Capital U Law School in Columbus, Ohio, and and so after a year, I just realized that was not the right path for me, and I learned about 50% turnover, and within 5 years, and just decided not to continue with that, but decided to continue with uh, the graduate program and then working in government programs. And when I was working at DHHR, I worked as a uh, essentially, an eligibility determiner for what programs are still very much in the news now, and that is Medicaid, SNAP, which used to be called the USDA food stamps. It's still administered by the USDA, but it's not known as food stamps anymore as much as SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And the reason I'm bringing these things up is because it's part of why I decided to run, was when the Trump administration ran this big, ugly, backstabbing bill on all of us last fall, or I'm sorry, last summer. And, uh, you know, the SNAP program alone in this country, helps about 42 million people. And a lot of people don't know how big those numbers are. But then when you look at it from West Virginia, uh, SNAP alone is, uh, I was just looking at these numbers recently. Uh, I think it's, I don't have, I know I'm wrong about that. I don't have the number for SNAP in particular. What I do have is that 70,000 West Virginia school children, because of these SNAP cuts, have had their daily food intake cut by like $6 per kid every day, every school day anyway, with the school lunch programs and school breakfast programs. And Carol Miller voted for that. She voted for those cuts, and they're ongoing. They haven't been made whole again since the shutdown in that started on November 1st. No, I take that back. It was October 1st. Started October 1st and lasted for about 6 weeks. And so, and then, like I say, that's the uh, SNAP program. And then I worked in Medicaid eligibility too, which is very much in the news because you've got about 500,000 people in West Virginia, West Virginians who are on Medicaid or the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, and those ACA tax credits have not been extended since the end of 25. So as of January 1, people in the state and across the country began losing their health insurance, and that's an ongoing catastrophe. And it's a catastrophe not just for people who were dependent on that health care, and it was made affordable by the ACA tax credits. Without those tax credits, that means a lot of people are unable to afford their insurance, thereby losing their insurance, because they can't pay it. Or also, when there's a lapse between your insurance, like if you had someone in the private sector and then you went on the ACA and then you drop the ACA because you can't afford it anymore, if there's enough of a lapse, it causes an issue about being able to get back on any private sector plan because you had an interruption. So that's another part of our terrible healthcare system. I support Medicare for all, uh, and or a single payer public option program. Everybody in, nobody out, birth to death, and like other countries have. I mean, we're an outlier on this. I mean, the American people have certainly the resources to have the same kind of system. It's a question of political will, and we're finally getting to the point where maybe there's some more political will on this because the costs and the access due to this $1 trillion in Medicaid cuts to an already dysfunctional system is an ongoing disaster. This is you know a 10-year budget. This is not a 1 year budget. This is a 10-year budget, and $1 trillion are being taken out of Medicaid. 500 billion are being taken out of Medicare. They're trying to privatize Social Security. And by the way, I'm affected directly by Social Security and Medicare because I'm a retired senior citizen at this point uh, on those programs. And there's in West Virginia, as um, you know, you there's hardly anybody that doesn't know somebody who isn't affected by Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, or veterans benefits. And those are the four main issues I'm running on. But then I've had to add three more that are really two, and that's that we're also affected by this big ugly budget that they passed. And I and people say, well, can we undo this? And yes, we can. And the point is to elect different people. There's a movement afoot nationally within the Democrat Party and state Democrat parties uh, to take back the House, and the Senate's in play now too. And if we can do that, we can undo these cuts, and we can replace those cuts that Carol Miller and Riley Moore voted for straight down the line. And that's the thing that got me into the race. Oh, and then before I tell you that part, the other part of the program I worked in that's also been negatively affected is some of the uh, TANF money. It used to be AFDC. It was known as that for since the 30s, and that was aid to families with dependent children. And then that was changed in the 90s, late 90s, under Bill Clinton, um, which was part of why a lot of people had some problems uh, with him as a more conservative Democrat than other progressive Democrats that I identify more with now, with AOC and Bernie Sanders and the Progressive Caucus, all of which I'd like to. And I've worked in Bernie's campaigns in 16 and 20 here in West Virginia. And I'm sorry, and I was in Florida at the time, but staying in touch with people here in West Virginia too over the years. And once I retired in 21, I got homesick and wanted to move back, and finally did. And then they passed this big ugly bill, and I wasn't looking to run for a U.S. House seat, but I was always interested in politics. Well, I was retired. I am retired. I got time, uh, interest, knowledge, experience, and I've always been a political, junkie in a manner of speaking. It's always been a consistent interest ever since I was a little kid. My parents were JFK Democrats. My grandmothers were FDR Democrats. And so there's a long history of extended family and friends being involved in West Virginia and national party politics. So, people say, "What can you do? What can you do when something like this happens?" Well, I decided what I could do, and I knew I could be good at it because I had a lot of history with it, was I could be a candidate this time and try to take the fight right to these four people in particular, Justice Capito, Riley Moore, who, by the way, is Shelley Moore Capito's nephew, and Carol Miller. And all four of them are Republicans. All four of them, their first job, in my opinion, and most anybody who you'll talk to in politics, is you protect your constituents. And they did nothing in fact, they knew the damage this was going to cause and did nothing to protect their own constituents at home, sort of like the way Lisa Murkowski voted for it, but at least in the Senate, but at least she got a carve out for Medicaid for Alaskans. I mean, Carol Miller and Riley Moore and Capito, all of whom are up for reelection this year, and Justice, who was just elected in 24 to a 6 year term, uh, none of them asked for any of that. And the thing that was so maddening to me uh, was that Capito sits on the Appropriations Committee in the Senate, and Carol Miller sits on the Ways and Means Committee in the House. And those are both in each chamber are very sought after positions, very sought after appointments to what are known as the money committees. So they had a direct, uh, you know, requirement in my mind to negotiate those expenditures and cuts and so on and so forth that with to a lesser degree because West Virginia gets getting hurt disproportionately because we're already a poor state to begin with. So the cuts that are coming down the pike in this 10-year bill, and they will keep coming until the legislation is changed, are already affecting a state that has had economic problems and is trying to right itself. So, that's part of why. I mean, that's the biggest reason I got into the race was the big ugly bill and wanting to defend uh, myself and my fellow West Virginians, and also wanting to find out, will West Virginians defend themselves against what I see as an immoral and economic attack on people, literally kicking them when they're down. And they knew or had to know that this was going to be the effect. We've got the WVHA, West Virginia Hospital Association, is on record having lobbied against the bill because 10 hospitals in the state, seven of which are in my district of 28 counties, are in danger of closing because of these Medicaid and Medicare cuts. So those are the kind of numbers we're talking about. And I mentioned the 500,000 people on SNAP or on Medicaid across the country. I'm sorry, across West Virginia, and then that's the other thing. The Medicaid cuts in this 10-year budget, it's about $1 billion taken out of West Virginia's economy, and these are jobs. I mean, these are payrolls. These are, healthcare is a growing body of employment in the state and a growing number of careers, and these hospital closures or certainly reductions in staff are going to lay people off. So this is an economic disaster or certainly a downturn again that was unnecessary. And there's not, uh, we've got two House districts here in West Virginia. When I was growing up, we had six, but the way they're doled out over the censuses, you go down to we're down to two now. We went from three to two after the 20 census, and uh, but there's not one out of 435 House districts in the country, there's not one of them that's not negatively affected by this bill. That's how unpopular it is, and that's why Republicans are heading for the exits or getting beat or know they're going to have tough races, and why I think that even in a state like West Virginia, that's seen as a red state, at least in recent years, it's not been that many years back that we were a solid blue state, um, where this is still. Uh, I believe that these two seats are vulnerable. Carol Miller, in particular, because my understanding from state GOP chairs and prominent GOP party members in the state is that they didn't want her to run because they're afraid that she is vulnerable for a variety of reasons. So that's just some of my background and why I got in the race, and I didn't know if I jumped into your other
No, no,
questions or not. But
no,
anyway, yeah,
I
You
actually
actually
want to,
did. Yeah,
yeah,
so you
yeah,
you went,
answered a lot of or a
yeah.
few of the first ones, which is cool. But Paul, I guess,
yeah, as I said, I was gonna name the other questions, but suggest you kind of answer those. And
Okay,
because of what we're looking at this in terms of somewhere between an hour and an hour and a half, we got 12 questions. And
okay,
this isn't to constrain you, but to see if you get to the meat of it. You went deep into policy. I wanted to note
right.
that deeper than I think we've had anyone else go into in the details. So appreciate it, and I hope when people listen to it, they get um, critical information that they may have missed otherwise. So thank you. Um,
Right, right.
the second question, which you already covered, which is
Okay.
where did you grow up and how did you get, and if not, how did you come to know West Virginia? I think you
yeah, but
completely covered that, but you're free to go back into that. And then what influenced you to pursue politics? I
yeah,
also think you covered that rather thoroughly, but you're free to take
Yeah,
another bite at that. And
yeah.
then so I'm going to put those two on the table. You're free reign. And then the
Okay,
next one, which is intended to give you a chance to get ahead of anything, is there anything about your history which, if revealed, could harm your campaign? And we give that to every candidate just to say, if you want to get ahead of something, this is something you can use this for. So that'll get us
Yeah.
4 questions forward.
Okay. Well, and I'll just to follow up a little bit on policy real quick, and I'll answer the other ones too. I want two things I didn't mention that I want to also make sure people are aware of in a West Virginia definition is that there's speaking of Social Security, we're not quite 1.8 million people, so these numbers have some great perspective when you're talking about 400 and about 443,000 West Virginians depend on Social Security. And then I mentioned a little over 500,000, 508,000 roughly West Virginians depend on Medicaid. And then another 110,000 West Virginia military vets depend on their government benefits from their service, and that goes for my family too. I mean, the three of my uncles served in World War II. I mean, they've all passed away now, but the point is, we've got. My father was a Korean War vet. My brother served in Iraq and Egypt and Kosovo. He's a younger brother who died of pancreatic cancer at 63 in November or September of 24. But West Virginia's got the highest military service rate of any state in the country, and on a per capita basis,
Wow.
and part of that's because there's a lack of economic diversity in the state. So it's been a way, and it's a poor state, so a lot of people couldn't afford to go to college. So they often would go into the military and then use the GI Bill, but particularly post World War II, to go on to college. But as far as I'm sorry, Paul. That was just part of the policy thing you mentioned. What was the second thing you asked about?
The last question was really um, if there is anything about your history which, if revealed, could harm your campaign.
Well, yeah, I think. I mean, when you're in politics, when you're on one side or the other, you can make some enemies, and I certainly expect that there will be people that will try to attack me and say, I got, uh, some kind of difference of opinion with somebody and left a job or, resigned or whatever. But, and I fully expect that could come up. I don't know if it will, because anything like that has been decades ago in other electoral cycles. And, but, but no, I've thought about that before I ever decided to file, which I decided to run in late July. Or I'm sorry, late August. That's when I announced publicly. Um, and my thing is, I'm just going to be an open book about whatever people want to ask me about. But I did think about that before filing, and I don't think there's anything that's going to, cripple me and that isn't out of the ordinary, so to speak.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Will? Oh, you're on mute, I think. Will?
Oops, my bad. Alrighty, so the next question is, who are the people you do not want voting for you?
Oh, um, well, that's a very interesting question because my feeling is I don't have people that I don't want to vote for me. I mean, if I can, to me, that's part of what this whole uh, common ground effort is. I'm trying to run a multi-generational campaign. I think that's real important to try to have more communication across issues with your generation and the generations in between me and you and people older than me for that matter. And uh, so so my whole approach is I don't know a stranger. I'll talk to anybody. I'll talk to Republicans. I'll talk to independents. And, not all Republicans are Trumpers and not all Democrats are progressives. But there is common ground in terms of the economics, wages being stagnant, healthcare lacking, affordability and access, much like the Mamdani campaign in the New York City mayor's race. That's where I'm coming from too, in terms of people are really up against it and not being able to afford their life. And West Virginia's got the highest residential water rates of any state in the country. I mean, what's wrong with that picture? And the water in the southern half of the state in many places is unpotable. You can't use it, or there are warnings on it, or you go get it from hillside outlets, and just for cooking and drinking. So that's a whole nother issue, is the water quality issue in mined out areas in southern West Virginia. And apart from just acid mine drainage, there's also, and that was another something I didn't mention that I should have in my background, and that I'm very interested in too, is environmental conservation and remediation, because like I say, I worked for the DEP in Florida, and I also worked here as a lobbyist for the West Virginia Citizen Action Group and the West Virginia Environmental Council at the state legislature, and then stayed in touch with that years after, continuing years after I had left that, and went to work in, like I say, a DEP in Florida. But um, anyway, so yeah, as far as voters, not voters that I wouldn't want voting for me, I would say none. I mean, because I think that there are, because of the economics of things, I think there are many things that I could appeal to any voter on. And if some of the social issues they want to run away from me on, well, they still might say, well, we'll give this guy a chance. And if they don't like, if I'm blessed enough to win in November, in May and November, and I'm there 2 years and they don't want me anymore, they can vote me out in 28. But no, I'm trying to make a very running as a proud progressive, and wanting to, historically as well as current day progressives, and wanting to recruit more people into that wing of the party. And I think that is a growing. I mean, the Congressional Progressive Caucus is, I think, the biggest caucus in the House. I think it's over 100 members now out of the 435. And so I would immediately join up with them. And if we're able to pull this off in this district, or both districts in West Virginia, it's going to be a national story. And I'll tell you why I think this can happen. So in November 24, a lot of people said, across the country, wrote West Virginia off. It's a Trump state. It's a red state. It's hopeless. You're not going to win. Nobody, no blue person's going to win there. And that may have been true to some extent, but there's also a lot more background in those voting numbers. And here's my quick summary. West Virginia voted 70-30 for Donald Trump in November 24. But let's look beyond the 70-30 numbers. The 70-30 was of the number of people who voted. Okay. Now, when you then move to how many of that was the number of people who were registered to vote in West Virginia, it drops to 44% voted for Donald Trump. When you drop then down to how many people were eligible in West Virginia to register and vote, Donald Trump's vote drops to 30%. So it's not, so what I like to say is that we're not a 70-30 state, we're a 30-70 state. 30% of the people voted, 70% of those uh, voted for Donald Trump. So my point is that there are 7 out of 10 eligible voters in West Virginia that did not vote at all, but who are persuadable. And not all of them. I'm not going to get all of them. Nobody is. But there's a great uh, motherload of voters to mine to help flip these two districts. It's a question of registration and turnout, and that's a lot of what I'm doing too across the state. And anybody can do it. You can get voter registration forms and do it in every community around the state, and turn them into your local county clerk. Um, So, my thing about the budget issues, as well as being able to turn those on Carol Miller and the other Republican members of our congressional delegation, is um, that she, they robbed the bank, they robbed our bank. I'm trying to get the money back, and there is a way to get the money back to make us whole again, because we've been attacked and damaged uh, for no good reason. The only reason, there are two reasons. One was to give tax breaks to millionaires and billionaires. And it'd be very interesting to see how much in tax breaks our congressional contingent received themselves in voting for those tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires. Which three of them, to my understanding, are Miller, Capito, and Justice to varying degrees. So, um, so that's an issue that helps people. I think gives people a lot of hope. And you've seen Democrats winning over the past year. You've seen them overperforming in state legislative races and as well as federal legislative races. There were two in the last 2 weeks. January 31st, there was a 31 point swing in a Texas state Senate district from red to blue state senator, and in a district that had been 50 years as a Democrat, a Republican state Senate seat. And then in last week in Louisiana, House District 60 flipped 37 points from November 24. Both districts voted for Trump, but this time they both voted for Democrats, going away. I mean, in huge numbers. So um, I think I've got, if I can win the primary, I think I've got a 50-50 chance. And I'm also running against somebody who's got, so you were talking about things that could damage campaigns. Well, Carol Miller's part of the Dutch Miller Chevrolet car family and car clan, and who've got 5 or 6 dealerships at least in Ohio and West Virginia. And she is originally from Ohio. Her father was a Congress person there, Sam Devine, uh, from 59 to 81, 22 years. So she grew up the daughter of a congressman, maybe even grew up in Washington. I don't know. She graduated from high school in Columbus, at least, and then went to school in North Carolina. I'm sorry, South Carolina, but I don't know where or when she actually set foot in the state. And then got into electoral politics in her mid 50s in '06. She served from 6 to 18 as a House of Delegates member from Cabell County and as a Huntington rep. And um, and then in 18 she ran for House, and you may recall, and if you don't, just a quick story on that. When in 18, Evan Jenkins, who had been in the House only since January of 15, he beat Nick Joe Rahal, who'd been there 38 years, in 14. And Evan was a former Democrat state senator from Wayne County. He changed parties in 13, ran against Nick Joe. There was a terrible loss of legislative seats across the country in that off year, the second of the two off year elections in Obama's administration. And Nick Joe lost, and he was the longest serving U.S. House member in the history of the state. He also happens to be a cousin of mine, Nick Joe Rahal from Beckley. But so he got beaten at 14. Well, Jenkins then, 3 years later, decides he got greedy. He wanted to run for U.S. Senate. But what he didn't calculate well enough was that the current governor, Patrick Morrisey, was then the state attorney general in the middle of a term in 18 and did not have to resign his seat to run for U.S. Senate. So Jenkins and Morrisey ran in the Republican primary. Jenkins lost. Suddenly, the U.S. House seat is empty, or at least by the time he serves out that one, he did have to choose uh, between the federal offices of Senate or House, and then so Morrisey, nearly beat Joe Manchin that year in 18. He only lost by 3%. And of course, now he's the governor, but absent, uh, the fact that Morrissey could, I mean, I'm sorry, Jenkins could have sat in that U.S. House seat for years. So the reason I bring that up is because Carol Miller's support is soft. She got into that race. She had name recognition from 12 years in the House. There was an open primary, open seat. She ran in I believe it was a seven candidate Republican primary in 18 and got 24% of the vote. So she was the nominee, and then Trump endorsed her campaign, and she won in 18. So that's why a lot of people feel like she's vulnerable. And she's also another reason I'm running is that she's incredibly unresponsive. People have across the district have trouble getting anyone on the phone, answering the mail. She doesn't do town hall meetings. She does photo ops sometimes, but even among the 28 counties, my understanding is she has not been to all seven counties in now over 7 years of representing this district.
Wow.
That's that's
Wow.
just I mean that's just inexcusable. I mean that's your job, and if you're not going to do your job, then get out of the way and let somebody else do it. Not to mention she doesn't need the job. She's admittedly on her congressional uh, what do you call them?
Page.
No,
Or-
the forms, the for financial disclosure forms.
Right.
She's got she's got admittedly worth a minimum of $20 million, and the range on those things is so wide that she just says the family's worth between 20 and $75 million. And the reason I bring that up too is that there's a question about whether or not she's trying to keep the seat warm for her son Chris Miller, who ran for governor in 24 and is now running for state senate out of Cabell County, I believe. And the other thing about that with the car dealership stuff that I wanted to mention for those who don't know it, but it has been in the news. This isn't anything no breaking story here, but it's worth mentioning again. You might remember the Paycheck Protection Program under President Biden during COVID that basically covered businesses' payrolls because so much business was lost. People that weren't going out, they were staying home, they were laid off, they didn't have money to buy cars or other things or homes, whatever. I mean, name a business, and they had a downturn during COVID, and um, and she was one of 13 House members, no senators, one of 13 U.S. House members that applied for this Paycheck Protection Program money on behalf of her family's car dealerships as an officer in the company. And she received minimum, I've heard two different numbers, 3.1 or $3.7 million in taxpayer money that was forgiven. The loans were forgiven. They didn't even have to pay them back on a no interest loan. And this went to a millionaire family who maybe they qualified for it by the letter of the application, but the perception was bad. And car dealers, for many good reasons, there are people have stories about being unsatisfied with their um, uh, car dealer experiences. And in Carol Miller's case, that was part of what people brought up was, did they even need the money? Did they follow the paperwork trail, doing it as it should be done to get this money? And maybe she did, but I just think it's worth noting that a multimillionaire, between 20 and $75 million family got $3.1 million minimum of taxpayer
Wow.
money excused on a no interest loan from the federal government. And she voted to conceal those records, tried to keep it from even being
Okay.
made public. And and then the executive branch overruled the Congress, said, look, you all can vote on that all you want, but it's taxpayer money. We're going to reveal it to the public, period, end of story. So that's how it came out. And, and she, so yeah, she voted against the disclosure of that, trying to protect herself. And she was, of the 13 House members who got that money, she got the second most. 11 of them were under $1 million. She got over three, and Brett Guthrie in Kentucky got over four. And I don't know what his business is, and he may have been perfectly legit. and not had any, questions raised. But Carol Miller's problem is that she then voted on this big ugly bill after taking PPP money to the tune of $3.1 million. She voted to cut Medicare, Medicaid, veterans benefits, ACA tax credits. She didn't extend, so that affected her people, and throughout the state. The SNAP program cuts that she voted for, again because they voted straight down the line with the president. They didn't, and remember, this bill was almost defeated. Vance had to vote twice in the Senate to break two different ties in the Senate, which translated means if Capito or Justice either one had voted on either one of those votes, the bill would have failed. In the House, there was at least one vote, 215 to 214, on the big ugly bill. And again, if either Moore or Miller had voted against it, it would have failed. So, they had leverage. They didn't choose to use it. And now they're reaping a whirlwind, and rightfully so, because of this immoral and economic attack on their own citizens. And I mentioned the
Thank you,
tax.
Hope. Uh,
I mentioned the taxpayer, the tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires, and I also want to mention that the other thing that happened with those cuts was that the money was literally just shoved over to ICE and Customs and Border Patrol, which has been, an illegal, unconstitutional, ongoing disaster throughout the country. And I'm for due process, and I'm for due process for anybody that's in the country, not just citizens, because it applies constitutionally to anybody that's in the country, and they're violating that. And they shoved all the money they cut from the social safety net programs and into tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires, and secondly, to funding these grotesque, huge funding additions to DHS, and particularly ICE and CBP, that are larger, a secret police essentially, that are larger than most other countries' militaries total. So that's, you know, that in addition to our regular armed forces under DOD. So the money's there. The question, if you want, like I say, they robbed our bank, and I'm just trying to get the money back, and I'm getting good response on that kind of thing.
Good. Hey, and also wanted to keep us on track somewhat.
Yes,
Um,
yes, yes. Sorry.
appreciate the no,
Yeah,
the depth um, is where it's got to go. So let me see.
yeah, yeah,
You want,
yeah.
you want to go for the next question, Will?
Yeah, the next question, you talked about it a little bit, I suppose, but it's what commitments are you willing to make regarding the sources of funding for your campaign, or like, who funds you and everything?
Well, I'm not going to take any corporate PAC money. I'm committed to that. I am trying to get the
Awesome.
AFL-CIO endorsement and funding from them, and I've already done their questionnaire. Have that to turn in tomorrow. Then I've also Progressive Democrats of America. Uh, there's a chapter in West Virginia now, and I may get that state endorsement as well as some national help particularly if I win the nomination, which I think I will. Um, the only thing we're waiting on right now is whether or not any postmarked candidate filings no later than January 31st would still come in by Tuesday. But so far there
It's
isn't, so it's
unlikely.
just me and her. Unlikely. And also, West Virginia Can't Wait. You all may remember them. They're still very active, and Stephen Smith is one of the principals on the board of them, and the co-chair, and he ran for governor in 20. Um, and they're still active in the state legislative and federal legislative races. So I'm also tomorrow. I've got a meeting, a first training session with them, and then a endorsement interview March 6th. And so I'm hoping to get that endorsement as well as talking to unions as a three-time union member, NASW, WVEA, when I taught school in Martinsburg High, and also AFSME. And so, and I'm trying to, also get money from the West Virginia trial lawyers because I believe people need more rights in court and more rights in terms of being able to get redress for wrongs and grievances and not less. I'm not interested in seeing court access further increased, and that's what we've seen in our lifetime is some of the uh, access to courts has been reduced as well. So I'm supporting more access for Joe and John and Mary Doe to court remedies too. And so, and the Trial Lawyers Association, of course, is one of those that advocate for that as well. Um, and also trying to appeal to enviros who have got some good background with conservationists and just trying to help with things that we can at the federal level in terms of um, cost of living issues, whether it be water rates or gasoline and natural gas, oil rates. To make sure that basically the price gouging isn't being just winked at. And I think that's part of the concern with the current administration is the cops are off the beat. I mean, there's way less enforcement and way less uh, investigation into what are a variety of certainly arguably criminal activities, including corruption. So yeah, I mean, I'm a good government person, and I'm going to try to live by the golden rule, and that's what I've tried to live my life by, and that's the way I want to
Awesome.
represent. So that's part of that.
All
Good.
right.
Awesome to hear that, Paul. If you want to do the next one.
Yeah. So we'll keep it on track then. And
Yeah,
this are one of our questions is many West Virginians, and you've covered this also, but there's a slight twist on this that you might expand on. Have faced issues for decades. Addiction, you've mentioned high healthcare costs, electricity
yes,
costs. You mentioned water rates, which was something we
yes,
could add to this. But
yes.
the question to put you more in the focus of this is what will you do differently to ensure your plans actually turn into results? I think you've touched it, but you want to expand on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think what I would do is and what I'm already interested in doing uh with the restoration of the Medicaid cuts and even expand those, I would even support um expanding uh Social Security benefits and not increasing the retirement age. I mean there's an easy fix. You can look up this group Patriotic Millionaires, and they're advocating and have been for some years of promoting a raising the wages that all
Right.
people pay into to 250.
Right.
And right now it's only about 175, and which means if you make, $1 million, I mean 825 of it isn't even taxed for Social Security. So if you went to 250, you'd make it solvent for the next 75 years instead of scaring people saying, well, 2033, it's going to run out. It's not going to run out. It's a question of funding
Well,
it with an easy fix on scrap the cap.
let me ask us.
And
Oh, thank you. May I? That's a
yeah.
great drill-in question that nobody ever covers. You obviously got some policy wonk experiences.
Oh,
What if?
yeah. Yeah.
What would it take? Because once you're over $1 million, you're really not the ordinary American in that
That's
sense.
right.
What would it take for people to really support? What the heck is there a cap for anyway?
Well,
Eliminate it entirely.
oh yeah, oh yeah. No, no, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying scrap the cap. I certainly support the Patriotic Millionaires going to 250K a year, but I would go beyond that. I mean, I would certainly support their efforts, and that would be a huge jump forward because right now all we do is annually do it just a slight adjustment up, from one, I remember a few years ago it was 110, then it went to 124, then it went to, 135 and so on. So, but here you could go literally $75,000 increase all at once from 174.75 to 250, and and then beyond. And the other thing that you're hitting on that made me think of this too, I support a wealth tax. I mean, these wealth taxes that are being promoted on these, you know, gigantically rich, obscenely rich people that could never spend the money that they have, like Elon Musk and all these other people that had these billionaires. I mean, who needs billionaires? That's fine if you want to become a billionaire, but you also need to kick back in because you're using society's roads and healthcare and infrastructure and all the other things that we have in common, schools and police departments, fire departments. Those are all part of what you need to uh, kick into the kitty for. So I support a 2% wealth tax that's been in the hopper, the legislative hopper federally for some years now, and even internationally that's been uh, uh, talked about and has
Interesting.
had some
Yeah.
traction.
Right.
So that's the thing too. The other piece of that is that I would want to have this idea of a tax system where very wealthy corporate people or very wealthy people and just in general, wind up having uh, negative income tax claims, meaning they get refunds from the federal government instead of paying any net tax at all in terms of how their income is counted. And the carried interest loophole on Wall Street is one in particular that is getting closer and closer to being done away with, which would help uh, tax much more of rather than every people that are make wage earners in the country. They're taxed on everything that they make uh, up to the 175, like I mentioned about Social Security. But with this, the dividends and other ways that income is accorded people on Wall Street, for instance, they wind up literally many of them not having to pay any tax or getting a refund or paying a very low tax. I'm with Warren Buffett and Bernie Sanders. The idea of secretaries paying more in tax than the CEOs of the companies they work for is just upside down. And you asked also about the uh, addiction issues here in West Virginia. That's another thing that these cuts are directly affecting. Oh, there's a lot of Medicaid money and Medicare money too, but it's particularly a lot of Medicaid money that supports addiction treatment and counseling and recovery. And so these funds have also been cut. So we already have a terrible problem in the state and throughout the country with addiction and all of the related issues to that. And they've cut the money for that. There was no reason to cut that money. There needs to be more money for that because it's an ongoing problem that has not been fully addressed. And we had these death merchants in West Virginia, the various healthcare companies that were running pill mills out of towns. There was one town that had 800 people. I may not get the number right. It was a very small town in southern West Virginia. In a short period of time, there were like 3 million uh, opioid pills that went through that town through these pill mills. And that's, it's just it's a, it's a it's a drug trafficking enterprise that needs to be prosecuted more and look, examined rather than just looked past and taking the donations from those companies that many um, uh, legislators do.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome,
Well,
awesome. Alrighty, so the next question for you is when experts present different recommendations, what process do you use to reach a well-reasoned conclusion?
Um, well, you know, that's a good question too, because I mean, in a manner of speaking, I'm an academic too, having um gotten a studied at West Virginia University in a policy analysis curriculum, and so that's where I come at this as a policy analyst, and I look for peer-reviewed studies. I look for what the history of the
Right, right.
reporting has been. I look to talk to experts in the field. I mean, again, I'll talk to anybody, but when you make a claim, I want you to back it up. And I'll ask the next question because that's just the inquisitive person that I am. I want to know how you believe what you believe and why you believe it. And if it's, and I've even said this a lot of times, I'll talk to anybody until they stop making sense to me. So that's all I'm trying to get at is just trying to, meet people with some common ground. I believe we've all got some common ground. We just have to, talk towards it and reach it and not and just try to be, civility has been our decline in civility has been talked about a lot. Well, I want to bring that back some too, and you know uh, and I think I can. And I'm not gonna. It's like you don't get anywhere calling people names, and I think we've gone way too far in that direction as a society. And there's an old Greek saying about and I'm Lebanese, by the way, but there's an old and Irish, but there's an old Lebanese saying, I mean, Greek saying says the fish rots from the head. And I think, particularly for the past year in particular, we've had that going on straight out of the White House and his minions. And it's not. We're in a dangerous time right now in this country, and in my opinion, if we don't take back one or both chambers of the federal legislature in November, you aren't going to recognize this country by the end of the 4 years of this term. That's. This is as bad as anything I've ever seen, and I was a teenager in the '60s, and that was bad. And but '60s and '70s, and so it's just. I'm trying to defend my country and my state and my people from what I see as a terrible set of events that have been ongoing and mushrooming in our country.
Thank you. Wow. Will, do you want me to try to encapsulate where the next ones are?
Yep, that
All
would be
right.
good.
So we talked about experts and how you go through that. Sounds like you've got tremendous amount of background. I believe you've covered, and so I'm going to go with the three questions that we've got, which you have covered because we've just given you a lot of space and you've covered
Yeah,
them
you answered a
incidentally.
lot.
Okay. Yeah,
Is
sure.
let me put
And
those out
you
then.
all rein me in whenever you need to. Yeah.
No, we said we would give you
Okay.
as much
Okay.
time as you want, and what's happened is you've um, by simply exploring and expanding, you've covered questions we would have asked.
Okay.
So, what is
Okay.
one necessary policy to address West Virginia's long-standing issues that might be unpopular, but you believe is essential? I'm pretty sure you've covered that, but we'll give you another bite at that. The next
Yeah.
question, and I can repeat these also. The next question
Sure.
is,
Sure.
what
Sure. Okay.
experience or expertise best prepares you for this role? I'm pretty sure you've covered that in
Yeah.
from multiple angles.
Yeah.
And where do you expect to rely on advisors? That's one twist that you may not have covered. And the last question before we get to the closing is how will you engage with constituents who did not vote for you or strongly disagree with your positions, which I also think you've covered multiple times.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if I can repeat any one of those, but do you want to just riff on anything, go right ahead.
Okay. Well, on as far as connecting with constituents, one of the things that I'm committed to doing is I mentioned about the lack of town hall meetings, even via Zoom, for that matter, that Carol Miller has undertaken, and I'm committed to that. I'm a I'm a I'm a Rhodes Scholar in terms of loving to take drives across the beautiful, and it is a beautiful state. My one of my uncles said West Virginia should have been just, fenced off and declared a national park in its entirety. And I tend to agree with him sometimes about that. But my point is that the 28 counties that I would be blessed to represent, to me, one of the greatest things I could do is go, is to deal out respect again to people because I feel like we've been disrespected by our own representatives. That's one of the really difficult things to take from politicians is when you lobby them for what is a common sense approach, i.e., voting down this big ugly bill, and they just plain refused and just basically said, "We don't care what you think." So my thing is to increase participation, increased belief in the people that their vote does matter, because it does. They have a lot of unexercised power. And we talked about how 7 out of 10 West Virginians, even in a presidential year in November 24, who could have registered and voted, didn't. And that's a sad commentary. And actually, there's one other piece about that. Across the country, that same set of numbers I mentioned earlier was 34%. So West Virginia actually voted at 30% of eligible voters. 30% was lower than the national figure of 34%. So that means West Virginians voted for Donald Trump at a lesser rate than the rest of the country. And, we've got great political intellect here. There's an old saying in West Virginia, everything in West Virginia is political except politics, and that's personal. And I think what we've got now is that you've got things so personal that these are kitchen table issues that people are really having worse trouble than they've had in a long time. And I want to help address that. I want to help publicize that. I want to go to any community hall in any of the 28 counties, all the 28 county seats, county commissions, city councils, and convene, town hall meetings to talk about this. And I'll learn more too. I don't know everything, but I'll learn more. They'll learn more from me, and they'll learn that they have more power than they recognize that they do, because so many people say, well, it doesn't matter who gets elected. I believe it does. I believe it matters who's in the chair. And I think we can see that again, starting right from the White House and on down. So, and when you mentioned about how I came to this, I think it is just something that I've had as a natural interest. My extended family's been involved in it, and it's part of why I don't read a lot of fiction, because you can't make up these stories of real life. I mean, and you open the paper or look on your computer at the news and say they did what today, and then you pick up that story from right there, and it just runs. It has legs of its own. And so there's always another issue. There's always another story. There's always another uh, uh, you know uh, need that that is not addressed, or certainly not addressed as it should be. As a for instance, and Medicaid and food stamps and um, uh, the TANF program too. They're across the country. There are people that are eligible for these programs
Mm.
that help them in their lives and their health and their children. And this is what people are angry about now. They're having things taken away. I mean, what I've said about this all, and part of why I got into this race, a big part, is that, usually politicians will come to you and they will say, well, I'm here to bring you something. I'm going to bring you a bridge or a school or a clinic or a new road, or pave the road that's never been paved, or get some new shopping center, money for a new shopping center where you didn't have one. You had to drive an hour to go to a grocery store or whatever. So, or a worst case, they'll say, well, it's been a bad year, bad cycle. We don't have as much money, but you aren't going to get hurt. We're going to maintain status quo. We're going to, hold the line, and you'll be okay. This cycle is completely different. I've never seen this in my life. This is the biggest slashing of healthcare coverage and nutrition assistance in the history of the country by any measure, adjusted dollars, inflation, whatever you want to call it. And or however you want to measure it, I should say. And that's, again, a 10-year budget. This is unceasing unless we change people who have voted for this, throw them out, put somebody new in that's committed to repairing and making people whole again, which I am committed to doing. And again, if they don't like what I do, vote me out in 2 years. I mean, that I'm gonna govern the way I'm talking, and that's how I want people to believe what I'm telling them, instead of thinking I'm just trying to get their vote. Yes, I'm trying to get their vote, but I'm trying to get their vote for things I believe that they want to have happen.
Right, right.
Got it. All right.
I mean that you answered all the last few questions. I mean, if unless you have anything else to add, then that's all the
Nope.
questions
No,
I'm
you
gonna
got
have for
the
you.
last one, which
Oh
I
yeah.
think you've covered, but
Yeah.
we've talked to seven
Oh yeah.
candidates, six candidates at this point,
Okay.
and one of
Yeah.
them, which you may want to participate in sending material to us on, is what is your plan for transparency and accountability while in office?
Um, well, I mean, I guess as far as yeah, transparency and accountability, I mean, I guess I'm not going to run away from any of my votes and or where I get my funding or not and be able to explain who's supporting me and why and I hope that that's going to be a lot of small dollar donors. I mean, yes, I'll take large dollar donors too, but again, that's up to people to decide how much they would want to donate. There's, a $3,500 maximum for any individual in the primaries and the generals each, and also and so for couples, $7,000 a year in each. I mean, in each of the primaries and generals. So that could be essentially with one couple, it could be up to $14,000 a year. But I mean, I understand. Most people don't have that kind of money. It's a tiny percentage of people that donate to political campaigns as a whole, anyway. So, but I want to grow that base. I want to have a larger number of Bernie Sanders is the most popular politician in the country, and I want to help continue his movement. He's changed the conversation since he announced in 2015. That's just a fact. I mean, in West Virginia in 2016, he ran against Hillary Clinton in the Democrat primary. He won every single county in the Democrat primary, and people forget that, but that gave him a huge boost and turned him into a national candidate because everybody assumed he just plain wasn't going to win here because it had gone red since George W. Bush in 2000 as far as the presidential race. And so so yeah, accountability. I'm gonna whatever reports I have to make, they're going to be current. I'm going to have good people hired that some of them be Capitol Hill veterans, others will be people from back home that want to get into this kind of work in the same way that I've been interested in it over the years. And I mentioned multi-generational before. I want this to be something where people can also aspire to working in the state legislature or the federal legislature or federal executive branch. And I want to help them make those introductions for them too, and use the office as a people's office. That's what I want to do. I want to go around the district on a regular basis and feel like, you know, they know who their rep is because too many people in this country don't know who their reps are.
Right.
Awesome. And Paul, also about your question about
Oh,
ranked
yes,
choice
I got a
voting.
closing
About
question.
which? Oh yeah, go ahead.
About closing question is
Yeah.
just to give, and this is one that I've had some passion around because I thought it answered a lot, addressed a lot of issues that are underneath the problems we see, which is, do you support and would you commit to supporting ranked choice voting?
I do support ranked choice voting, and I'm glad you asked that. And I'm glad, Alaska and I think Maine does it, and Alaska does it, and there's a
New
bunch
York
of
City?
cities that do it.
Yep.
Yeah, and I support that. I've known about that for some years. There's one organization online, I think it's called Fair Vote, that's been pushing that for years. I used to know the guy. He may still be there, Rob somebody. I can't think of his last name, but anyway, he uh, is one. I mean, that issue is one that, yes, I think what it would do, I think would be, and it has shown to increase turnout where it happens because people don't feel like their vote is hopeless in a two-way race. You can vote, as you know, with the ranked choice voting one, two, three, and or four or five, whatever the numbers are, and then stay in it until somebody gets 50% between the final two. And so, yeah, I mean, I would support that. I don't know how much appetite there is for it uh, in either in the state or at the federal level. But I do believe that the more people are educated on it and understand it, they like the idea because they know they don't have to choose the lesser of two evils. They can vote for who they want, and they can vote for a second pick after that, and
All right.
so on.
All right.
Awesome.
Well,
Well,
thank you. Will,
yeah,
want to close this up?
of course. Thank you so much, Vince. That was a very detailed interview. That's what
Yeah,
we're really looking for in candidates. So
yeah.
that's
Well,
all.
yeah, I really appreciate you all reaching out
Of
too, and
course.